Can you elaborate on how timing and incentives play an important role in removing these obstacles to get out of the way of disaster?
Sure. Timing is one of the most discussed elements of Gray Rhino. That it's talked about in the book a little bit, involving Japan. Japan's debt situation. They were a very, very high debt to GDP ratio, and for many years, investors were making what they called the widowmaker trade. They were betting that Japan was going to go under. And sometimes you bet that something's going to happen. You've got to have a lot of capital behind you to be able to ride it out if it doesn't happen when you think it's going to. Also the subprime crisis. Some of the people who saw that coming at one point were underwater, tens of millions of dollars, waiting for that to happen. So timing is really incredibly important. And just because something doesn't happen when you say it might, doesn't mean that it's not going to. And I think it's important to keep your, really keep your eye on the underlying dynamics and what's going to happen. As far as incentives, there's so many structural obstacles to dealing with things. For politicians in particular, if they make a hard decision that is good for their community in the long run, but people are upset with the short-term impact, they're going to get kicked out of office. And that's a really tough thing. I think term limits would make a difference in that. People are not counting on being in office for years and years and years and years. Or looking back to Argentina, which was one of the examples that inspired the book, about 9 months before Argentina collapsed in 2001, there was a proposal that went around Wall Street for a voluntary write-down, voluntary quote unquote. Nobody would have been super happy to volunteer, but Argentina didn't want to do it, and the banks didn't want to do it for several reasons, but part of that had to do with how they had their Argentinian debt reflected on their books. That it wasn't marked to market, so even though it was trading at considerably below face value, on their books, it was at 100%. So they would have to write down significantly more than people who were trading it day to day were. So that that structure behind marking things to market and reflecting the true value is one example of an incentive, a structural obstacle to making the right decision. I'm very, very big on process, on policy, on the environment we set up around the decisions that we make. And I feel that people don't pay enough attention to that. And if we were to take a step back and look more at how our systems get in the way of dealing with gray rhinos, I think we'd be far ahead of where we are now.